Imagine waking up in the Middle Ages with a fever, a broken tooth, or a wound that will not heal. There are no hospitals as we know them, no antibiotics, no clean surgery, only herbs, prayers, leeches, bloodletting, saints' relics, and a healer doing their best by candlelight. Tonight, we step into the painful reality of medieval medicine, where hope was fragile, pain was common, and survival often depended on luck. If you enjoy slow, immersive history for sleep, please like this video. Subscribe to the channel and settle in for the journey. Hey guys, tonight you find yourself beneath the shadow of a walled town at dusk, with cold stone rising before you, damp straw clinging to your cloak, smoke twisting in the rafters of the gatehouse, and distant bells trembling through the river mist. Mud cakes your boots so thickly that each step sounds like the earth is trying to keep you for itself. A horse exhales beside you, its winter breath pale in the torchlight, while somewhere beyond the oak doors a dog barks as if it has seen every bad decision you have ever made. Medieval travel brochures really oversold this experience. You pull your fur-lined cloak tighter, though the wool smells of rain, old smoke, and someone else's sheep. And let us be honest, you probably would not last a week out here. Not because you are weak, but because medieval life has opinions about comfort, and all of them are hostile. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you settle in, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is in your little corner of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand beneath the town gate as the last of the daylight drains from the sky, leaving the clouds the colour of bruised pewter. The gatekeeper takes his time, because time belongs to men with keys, and he wears his iron ring at his belt as proudly as a lord wears a chain of office. Behind him, the tunnel through the wall smells of wet stone, torch pitch, horse dung, and stale ale. Rushes have been scattered over the floor, but they are old rushes, trodden flat by cartwheels and boots, and they hold every cent given to them with the loyalty of a monk keeping a secret. You pass under the arch with your head lowered, not because you must, but because the stones seem heavy enough to press a thought from your skull. Above you, a murder hole gapes blackly in the ceiling. It is not in use tonight. Thank mercy. Though it does give the place a charming little touch, as if the town has decorated with anxiety. The guard waves you through after taking a small toll, a clipped coin that disappears into his glove, and you step into the town's dusk-lit throat. The streets are narrow and crooked, ribbed with gutters where brown water creeps toward the river. Timber houses lean toward one another overhead, their upper stories nearly touching, as though the buildings are whispering across the lane. From open shutters come smells of pottage, smoked fish, coarse bread, onions softening in fat, and the sour warmth of brewing ale. Somewhere a woman beats a rug from a window, somewhere a child coughs, somewhere a bell rings from a chapel tower. Slow and hollow, marking the hour when honest people should already be indoors and dishonest people are at least expected to be quiet about it. You follow the sound you've been told to follow, not the bell, not the market crier, not the laughter leaking from the alehouse, but the rough murmuring near the old sick house by the east wall. It stands beside a narrow lane where frost gathers first and leaves last. The building is long and low, built of stone darkened by years of smoke and rain. Its roof sags a little, not enough to collapse, but enough to make you aware that everything in this world is negotiating with gravity. A small cross is fixed over the door, Beneath it hangs a lantern, its flame shivering in a horn pane clouded with soot. Outside the door, people wait. They wait because waiting is one of the chief medicines of the age. They wait with cloaks pulled close and hands tucked into sleeves. They wait with bundles of linen, cracked bowls, wax candles, wooden crutches, and little packets of dried herbs tied with thread. A man sits on an overturned basket, breathing through his mouth. A girl leans against her mother's side, pale beneath a hood of faded teal wool. An old shepherd mutters a charm under his breath, touching the same bronze pilgrim badge again and again, as if the saint stamped into it might wake if rubbed hard enough. No one can quite agree whether the sick house is a place of healing, mercy, quarantine, or simply the last warm room before heaven makes up its mind. Some swear the brothers inside can bring down a fever with vinegar cloths and prayer. Others say the place is useful mostly because it keeps coughing people away from the market. Even now, it is hard to tell whether that is cruelty, kindness, or the usual medieval mixture of both. You step nearer and the door opens. A gust of warmth rolls out, thick with beeswax, damp wool, old straw, boiled herbs, and the faint sharpness of vinegar. The sound inside is not loud, but it is layered low prayers, soft groans, a wooden cup set down, the scrape of a stool, the whisper of wool shoes over rushes. A lay brother in a brown habit looks you over. His face is narrow, his beard uneven, and his hands are red with cold, though he has clearly been indoors for hours. He carries a basin in one hand and a cloth in the other. The cloth has been wrung out so often it hangs like a tired flag. "You have come from the road," he says. You nod, because your boots have already confessed everything. He lets you in. Perhaps because you look tired, perhaps because the night is cold, or perhaps because medieval doors are less firm when someone is watching from behind them. The dog from the gate slips in after you, silent and confident, as if invited by a higher authority. The brother notices, frowns, and then seems to decide the animal is less troublesome than half the people waiting outside. Inside, the sick house is one long chamber divided by shadows. Straw pallets lie along the walls beneath wool blankets. A few beds belong to those with coin or patrons. The rest are simple bundles of hay, linen, and endurance. At the far end, a small altar glows beneath 3 beeswax candles. One candle has burned low already, bending to one side, its golden wax pooling like a little sun collapsing at the edge of night. Beside it rests a reliquary no larger than a loaf of bread, set with dull glass stones. The brother crosses himself whenever he passes it, though you notice he does so quickly, as if politeness matters even when certainty does not. A woman near the hearth stirs a pot that smells of sage, barley, and something bitter enough to make the tongue hide behind the teeth. She's not a nun, not exactly, more likely a widow who has learned enough remedies to be useful and enough silence to be trusted. She ladles the brew into a wooden cup and hands it to a boy whose cheeks shine with fever. His father holds him upright. The boy drinks, grimaces, and whispers something that might be a complaint or a prayer. In medieval medicine, the two often share a cup. You are given a place near the wall, on a bench polished by decades of uneasy sitting. The stone behind your shoulders is cold even through your cloak. A rushlight sputters nearby, made from a peeled rush dipped in fat, and its small flame gives more courage than brightness. You warm your hands around a cup of thin ale, safer than much of the water, though no one says this as a grand scientific truth. They simply know what sits poorly in the belly, what turns foul in a barrel, and what has kept their grandparents alive long enough to complain about everyone. Across the room, an elderly man's wrist is being held between two fingers while a brother counts softly beneath his breath. He is taking the pulse, though he seems to listen not only to the body but to the hour, the season, and perhaps the mood of heaven. Medieval bodies, you're beginning to understand, are not treated as private machines of flesh and bone. They are weather systems. They are little kingdoms of heat, cold, dryness, wetness, sin, diet, stars, sleep, sorrow, and bad luck. If one balance tips, everything may follow. A younger monk enters from a side door carrying a bundle of fresh linen. He has ink on his thumb and suspicion in his eyes. You will remember him later, though tonight he barely looks at you. He places the linen beside the hearth, checks the half-burned candle near the altar, and murmurs to the older brother about a cart delayed by a broken wheel on the western road. The words drift to you like smoke. Broken wheel, western road, more travellers coming, perhaps, or a physician, or someone with herbs that cost too much and work too slowly. Near your feet, the dog circles 3 times and lies down with a sigh worthy of a bishop. You envy him. He has chosen his place in the world and sees no reason to explain it. A woman at the nearest pallet fingers a string of beads, each one darkened by years of hands. She whispers the name of a saint said to help aching throats. Some swear that if the prayer is spoken before the 3rd bell after sunset, and if the sufferer drinks warm ale with honey, the swelling eases by morning. Others insist the honey matters more than the saint. The brother, wisely, allows both opinions to exist. In a place like this, hope is not corrected unless it becomes dangerous. The night presses against the shutters. Rain begins again, light at first, then steady, tapping on the roof like small fingers asking to be let in. Someone adds wood to the hearth, and sparks climb into the soot-black rafters. Your cloak steams faintly. Your boots soften in the warmth. You sit among strangers, listening to coughs, prayers, and the low movement of tired helpers, and you begin to understand the painful reality of this world medicine is not one thing. It is a cup held to trembling lips. It is a cold hand on a hot forehead. It is a charm tucked under straw, a candle promised to a saint, a bitter herb crushed between fingers, a basin of water carried carefully through the dark. And for tonight, before leeches, razors, tooth drawers, learned physicians, and costly powders enter your path, it is mostly this a room of worn stone and weary mercy, where people do what they can, because dawn is still far away. The brother with the basin leads you away from the busiest stretch of the sick house and through a narrow passage where the stone walls sweat with old damp. Your cup of thin ale warms your fingers less than you hoped, but hope is a busy little servant tonight, carrying more than it can manage. Behind you, the long chamber continues its hush of coughs, prayers, and shifting straw, while before you another door opens into the monastery guest house, a quieter room meant for travellers, pilgrims, poor guests, and anyone too tired to be turned back into the rain without making the brothers feel uneasy about their souls. The guest house smells different from the sick room, though not by much. Here there is more smoke, more wet wool, more old leather, and a stronger bite of vinegar that catches at the back of your throat. A row of pallets lies along one wall beneath wool blankets patched in russet and brown. Rushes cover the floor, fresher than those at the town gate, scattered with lavender and meadowsweet to sweeten the air. It works a little. Medieval cleanliness often seems to mean persuading bad smells to stand behind slightly better smells, which, to be fair, is more strategy than many kingdoms possess. Near the hearth stands the monk you noticed earlier, the one with ink on his thumb and suspicion in his eyes. Now you see that he is not as young as the shadows first made him seem. His face has the pale, narrowed look of someone who reads by candlelight and forgets that daylight is not a rumour. A dark stain marks the cuff of his sleeve where ink has dried. Another stain, sharper and paler, marks the front of his habit where vinegar has splashed. He smells as if a manuscript, a pickle barrel, and a thundercloud have all agreed to share one body. He is the infirmary, or near enough to it, though no one says the word with ceremony. In a monastery, titles matter, but tired hands matter more. He tends the guest house, the sick room, the herb stores, and probably half the brothers who pretend they are not ill because admitting weakness would interrupt the copying of psalters. He looks at you, then at the dog, who has followed with the serene boldness of a creature protected by no law except confidence. That animal belongs outside, the monk says. The dog sits. The monk studies him for a moment, then gives the same sigh you heard from the gatekeeper, the sigh of a man defeated by something too small to justify a battle. Then he belongs near the door. You take the place shown to you on a low bench by the hearth. A clay pot hangs above the fire, and beside it sits a small table crowded with bowls, linen strips, a brass spoon, a mortar, a bundle of dried sage, and little packets tied with thread. A beeswax candle burns beside a wooden cross, its flame leaning whenever the wind finds some crack in the shutters. The monastery bell sounds beyond the walls, deep and patient, and the monk pauses at once, head bowed. Everyone else in the room stills with him. Even the dog seems to consider holiness, though he may simply be listening for kitchen noises. When the bell fades, the room breathes again. The infirmary goes first to a pilgrim stretched beneath a grey blanket. The man has a fever, and his pilgrim badge St. Thomas, perhaps, though the stamped face is worn almost smooth, rests on the blanket near his collarbone. The monk dips linen in vinegar and lays it across the man's brow. The pilgrim mutters, shivers, and clutches the edge of the pallet. Beside him, a younger traveller whispers a prayer so quickly the words trip over one another in the rush to be useful. No one can quite agree whether vinegar truly draws heat from the body, or merely gives the living something brisk to do while fever makes its own arrangements. Some swear it cleanses corruption from the air, some say it strengthens the spirits. Others only know that it is sharp, cheap, and available, which in medieval medicine is nearly a miracle already. The monk checks the pilgrim's tongue, then his eyes, then the warmth behind his ears. He asks what the man has eaten. The answer is coarse bread, smoked fish, and pottage from an alehouse near the west gate. The monk grunts in a manner that suggests he has never trusted alehouse pottage, and has been waiting years for evidence. He takes a pinch of dried batoni, crushes it between finger and thumb, and drops it into a small cup with warmed ale and honey. The smell rises soft and bitter-sweet. Batoni, people say, is good for the head, the nerves, the stomach, bad dreams, bad thoughts, and certain complaints that seem to move about the body like unpaid rent. You watch him stir. The spoon clicks against clay. Outside, rain runs from the eaves in steady threads. A cart passes slowly beyond the guest-house wall, the wheels grinding through mud, and for a moment you think of the broken wheel mentioned earlier, delayed somewhere on the western road. Perhaps it is still there in the dark, one side sunk deep, its driver cursing saints in a voice he will later pretend was prayer. The infirmary lifts the pilgrim's head and helps him drink. There is no drama in the gesture, no grand cure, no sudden blessing, no shining light, only the careful angle of a cup, a supporting hand, and the patience to wait while a sick man swallows. This, you notice, is the rhythm of the place. The remedies are strange, sometimes wise, sometimes wishful, but the hands are steady. On another pallet, a woman with a swollen cheek sits wrapped in a saffron shawl dulled by rain. She has come from a nearby village, led by her brother, who keeps explaining her suffering to everyone as if volume may replace knowledge. The monk listens, or seems to. Then he takes from a small box a scrap of parchment marked with tiny writing. He does not show it closely. He folds it once, twice, and ties it in a linen thread. For the night, he says, placing it near the woman's pillow, not in the mouth. The brother looks disappointed, as though he'd been hoping for something louder. Some swear that written charms work best when made by holy hands, especially if the ink contains a little ash from blessed palms, or if the words are copied before sunrise. Others warn that too much trust in charms makes heaven frown. Those who tell the tale never fully agree where prayer ends and charm begins, particularly when pain is sitting beside the fire and asking for an answer. The monk seems to avoid the argument by doing both. He gives the woman a warm cloth steeped in herbs, murmurs a psalm, and tells her brother to stop poking the swelling, advice that may be the finest medicine offered all evening. You are given bread on a trencher, dark and coarse, with a little cheese so hard it might once have served as masonry. You eat because the road has emptied you. The bread tastes of rye, smoke, and the knife that cut it. A novice brings more ale, thin but clean enough, and places a wool blanket around your shoulders without asking. His fingers are cold. Yours are colder. For a while, you sit in the layered warmth of the guest house and listen. A scribe sits near the hearth copying names into a narrow book guests received. Candles spent, herbs used, alms given, perhaps deaths too, though he turns the page before you can see. His quill scratches softly. The sound mingles with the rain and the low mutter of the infirmera, ink, vinegar, beeswax, wet wool, bitter herbs, dog breath, tired human hope. All of it folds together beneath the soot-black rafters, until the room feels less like a place of cure than a small boat drifting through the night. The half-burned candle from the sick room is brought in and set beside the guest-house cross, its flame still stubborn, still crooked. The suspicious monk notices you looking at it. "Waste no wax," he says. It is not scolding. Exactly. Wax is dear. Light costs something. Warmth costs something. Healing costs something too, whether paid in coins, prayers, patience, or pain. You nod, and he turns away as if satisfied that you have learned one useful thing. Near the door, the dog sleeps with his nose on his paws. The rain softens. The bell sounds again. Later now, deeper in the night, you lean back against the wall, the wool blanket scratchy beneath your chin, and watch the monk move from pallet to pallet with his vinegar cloths, his bitter cups, his folded charms, and his careful, ink-stained hands. And though you cannot tell which remedies will help by morning, you understand why people come here through mud and cold. Not because the brothers hold power over sickness, but because they hold a candle against it. And sometimes that is the only light the world is willing to give. The bell's last note settles into the rafters like a bird folding its wings, and the guest house grows so quiet that you hear rainwater slipping from the eaves into the yard. You are half inside sleep when the infirmera touches your shoulder with two cold fingers and nods toward the side door. There is no command in the gesture, only the ordinary certainty that in this place, anyone still awake may become useful. You rise with the wool blanket dragging from your shoulders, your boots stiff with drying mud, and the dog opens one eye as if deciding whether mercy requires supervision. The passage beyond the guest house is narrow and low. The half-burned candle travels with you in a horn lantern, its little flame wobbling over stone, oak beams, and hanging bunches of herbs that brush your hood with brittle leaves. The monk carry a covered bowl. A lay sister follows with folded wool cloths, a small knife, a basin, and linen so white it seems almost proud of itself. Outside, in the rain-dark yard. You cross into a smaller chamber used by town healers when the sick house overflows. It stands near the herb shed, where winter has turned the garden beds into black ridges under frost. Inside waits the village healer. She is old, though not in the way of frailty. She looks like a pollarded willow that has survived every storm by agreeing to bend and then refusing to die. Her gown is dark russet wool, patched at the elbows. A teal kerchief binds her hair. Around her neck hangs a wooden cross, a leather pouch, and what might be a hare's foot, though no one mentions it. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether such things are charms, memories, or simply what gathers in a woman's pocket after too many years of being asked for help at midnight. On the table before her sits an earthen jar covered with linen. The jar moves slightly. You wish it had not. The healer notices your look and smiles with 3 teeth and tremendous patience. "Leeches," she says, as if naming a kind of bread. The dog, who is of course followed, sits near the threshold and appears to reconsider the entire human project. The chamber is lit by candles and a small brazier. Shadows flatten against the walls, making the room look like a painted page, all dark outlines and trembling gold. On a shelf stand little jars of dried mint, rue, yarrow, fennel, and powdered bark. There are bleeding bowls of glazed clay, a brass cup, and a spindle left by someone called away mid-thread. Medieval life rarely separates work from hunger, or healing from housekeeping. A person may stir pottage, scold a child, bind a cut, and bargain over firewood all before the second bell, and still be told she has had a quiet morning. A man from the sick house is brought in and seated on a stool. He's broad-shouldered, a carter by the look of his hands, with a face grey from fever and fear. The monk murmurs that his wheel broke on the western road, and you remember the whisper from the night before broken wheel. Delayed cart, someone coming through the mud. Here he is, then, smelling of wet leather, axle grease, and cold rain. His wife stands behind him, twisting her apron until the fabric becomes a rope. No one rushes. That may be the strangest kindness of the room. The healer warms her hands over the brazier. The monk sets the covered bowl down. The lay sister lays wool cloths across the table in careful squares. The carter breathes and tries to look like a man who would rather be anywhere else, but is too proud to say so. Medieval courage often resembles being trapped in a room while everyone else prepares instruments. The monk speaks softly of humour's blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile, the old fourfold weather carried inside the body, too much heat, too much wetness, too much heaviness of blood. Food may thicken it, grief may chill it, anger may dry it, the moon may pull at it, or so some swear, just as it pulls at tides and restless minds. No one can quite agree whether the moon truly governs the blood, but everyone knows it governs the confidence of those who make calendars, and that seems nearly as powerful. The healer lifts the linen from the jar. The leeches cling in dark loops to the wet inside of the clay. They're smaller than your dread suggested, which is not the same as comforting. She chooses them with a little wooden spoon and places them in a shallow bowl of clean water. They twist and lengthen, patient as bad news. The carter looks away. His wife looks directly, perhaps because women in this world are not given much leisure to faint. Someone whispers a blessing to Semblé, though he is more often called for throats. Saints, like village tools, are expected to serve several purposes when the need is sharp. The healer washes the carter's arm with warm water and vinegar. She presses her thumb along the flesh, searching not only for a vein but for the right place, the proper place, the place where imbalance might be invited out. She murmurs words too low for you to catch. They may be a prayer. They may be a charm. They may be a list of things she must remember before dawn, even now. It is hard to tell whether holiness lies in the words or in the steadiness of the hand saying them. When the leech is set upon the skin, the room becomes very still. You expect drama, because you're from softer imaginings, where every remedy must announce itself. Instead, there is only a small tightening of the carter's mouth, a breath drawn through the nose, and the healer's palm resting lightly near his wrist. The monk watches the man's colour. The lay sister folds and refolds a cloth. Rain taps the shutters. The dog sighs, perhaps disappointed that no one has offered him bread. After a while, the healer removes the leeches and places them back into a separate jar, because even the smallest servants of medicine must be sorted properly. She binds the carter's arm with soft wool and linen. The monk gives him warm ale with honey and a bitter powder. His wife thanks everyone twice, then a third time, because thanks cost nothing and may help secure kindness if the fever returns. You step back into the passage with the lantern. The half-burned candle is shorter now, its flame lower but stubborn. Behind you, the healer rinses bowls. The lay sister shakes out cloths, and the monk makes a mark in his little book. Leeches by candlelight, prayers under breath, humours measured against the moon. It all seems strange, painful, and yet tender in its own rough shape. You carry that thought back toward the guest house, where the wet wool smell waits, where the dog trots beside you, and where the night is not finished teaching you what healing means when the world is dark. By the time you return from the leech chamber, the night has loosened its grip just enough to become the hour when people who should be asleep begin making poor choices. The infirmera sends you with a novice toward the town lane, not far, only to carry a note to a man lodging near the alehouse by the west gate. The monk's ink-stained thumb presses the folded scrap into your palm, and though he says little, his look suggests that if you lose it, heaven may forgive you. But he personally will need longer. The dog comes too, because by now he has appointed himself your guide, witness, and silent critic. You step back into the wet street with your cloak pulled high around your neck. Rain has thinned into mist, and the town lies under it like bread beneath a damp cloth. The gutters whisper, shutters are closed. From the sick house behind you comes the faint glow of candles and the memory of warm vinegar. Before you, beneath leaning timber houses and hanging signs, a louder warmth spills from the alehouse. Its sign creaks above the door, a painted tooth dangling beneath a foaming cup, which seems less like an advertisement and more like a warning from a practical-minded saint. No one can quite agree whether the tooth was added first or the ale cup, but the locals swear both have caused equal misery. You duck inside. The alehouse is low, smoky, and crowded with the kind of cheer that gathers when rain, darkness, and discomfort have all been told to wait outside. Soot blackens the rafters. Rushes cover the floor, scattered thickly near the door where boots have dragged in half the street. A fire burns in the hearth, giving more smoke than flame, and benches crowd around plank tables set with trenchers, wooden cups, onions, cheese, coarse bread, and smoked fish. The air smells of ale, wet wool, old straw, garlic, tallow, horse leather, and human confidence, which may be the most dangerous scent of all. You find the man named in the monk's note near the far wall, but before you can reach him, the room's attention turns to the centre table, where a travelling tooth drawer has taken command of the evening. He is a lean fellow in a faded indigo coat, with a small cap tilted back from his brow and a leather roll of tools spread before him as proudly as any knight displaying captured banners. Beside the tools sits a basin, a cup of strong ale, a cloth, a little pouch of cloves, and a string of old teeth tied together like a monk's rosary after a very unfortunate pilgrimage. His assistant, a boy with quick hands and quicker eyes, moves through the crowd collecting coins, nods, insults, and promises to pay later, all of which he weighs with equal distrust. The tooth drawer raises a small iron instrument and smiles. "Clean work," he declares. A man at the table, red-faced from ale and dread, tries to smile back and fails in a way that makes several people look into their cups. He has a swollen jaw wrapped in a linen bandage, and he grips the edge of the bench with both hands. His friends stand behind him, offering encouragement of the deeply useless sort. "Hold still," one says. "Think of spring," says another. A third adds, "My cousin had one pulled and lived." This last comfort is received with the silence it deserves. You give the folded note to the man by the wall, who tucks it into his belt without reading it, because the tooth drawer has begun, and even private business must bow before public discomfort. The alewife moves between tables with a pitcher, stepping over the dog as if he has always belonged there. She's broad-armed, sharp-eyed, and able to hear an empty cup from across the room. When she sees you watching the scene, she mutters, "Better out than in," which seems to be the guiding philosophy for many medieval treatments and several kinds of stew. Some swear that aching teeth are caused by tiny worms gnawing inside the tooth, wicked little creatures that dislike smoke, cloves, charms, or the right saint invoked in the right tone. Others say cold wind gets into the jaw. A few blame too much sweet wine, though this opinion is rarely popular in alehouses. Those who tell the tale never fully agree, but they all agree that once the pain has made sleep impossible, a person will bargain with almost anyone carrying iron tools. The tooth drawer gives the suffering man a long drink of ale, presses clove against the gum, and murmurs a charm so softly that it could be prayer, performance, or simply professional habit. He wraps his fingers in cloth, tilts the man's head toward the candlelight, and asks two men to hold his shoulders. The crowd leans in with that ancient human expression that means both concern and curiosity, and possibly a desire to discuss this loudly later. You look away toward the hearth, because there are limits to education. The fire pops. A child asleep under a table shifts beneath a cloak. A merchant counts coins with 2 fingers and a thumb darkened by ink. Near the door, a pilgrim with a scallop shell on his hat tells a woman that in a town 3 days east, a healer cures toothache by touching the jaw with a relic wrapped in silk. The woman asks whether it works. The pilgrim says, "For some." This is such a medieval answer that no one questions it. Then the room tightens. There is a brief cry, sharp, but not long, and immediately everyone speaks at once, as though noise may cover what pain has revealed. A cup is knocked over. Isle runs across the table and soaks into a trencher. The dog lifts his head, decides humans are continuing as expected, and lowers it again. The tooth drawer holds something up between finger and cloth, and the room cheers with a relief far greater than the object seems to merit. The red-faced man sags, breathing hard, while his friends slap his back as if they have personally defeated an army. The tooth-drawer bows. His assistant collects more coins. The alewife brings the patient another drink, which may be compassion or business, though in this room the two are not enemies. You sit at the edge of a bench and are handed a piece of bread without asking. It is coarse, dark, and slightly damp from the table. You eat it anyway. The ale beside it is sour but warming, and after the cold lane even sour warmth feels like favour around you. Conversation swells again. People speak of gums, saints, worms, barber surgeons, rotten molars, and one uncle who supposedly tied a bad tooth to a door and had his wife slam it, though no one can agree whether the door, the tooth, or the marriage suffered most. The man with the monk's note finally reads it by candlelight. He is a carter's cousin, summoned to help repair the broken wheel at first light. He sighs, folds the note, and orders more ale, which suggests that Dawn's problems are being asked to wait politely outside. You linger only a little longer. The half-burned candle from the monastery seems to glow in your memory, quieter than this room and somehow kinder. Yet here too, in the smoky foolishness and spilled ale, people are trying to endure pain with the tools they have: iron, cloves, charms, laughter, strong drink, and the comforting presence of everyone pretending this is a perfectly normal evening. When you step back into the lane, the mist has silvered the cobbles, the dog pads beside you. Behind the alehouse door, laughter rises again, tired and warm beneath the tooth sign. Ahead, the monastery bell waits somewhere in the dark, patient as breath, calling you back toward colder stone and slower mercies. You leave the alehouse warmth behind like a dream that smells strongly of smoke, onions, and questionable courage. The lane outside is silvered with mist, and the town seems to have pulled its shutters tighter against the damp, somewhere behind you, beneath the painted tooth sign. Laughter rises again, softened by wood and distance. Somewhere ahead. The monastery bell answers with a slow note that lays itself across the roofs and gutters. You follow it for a while, boots whispering through mud, the dog padding close enough to brush your hem whenever he decides you have drifted from the proper path. At the guest house door, the suspicious monk waits with his vinegar-stained sleeve and his ink-dark thumb, as if he's been standing there since the world was young and mildly disappointing. He takes back the message you carried only after asking whether the carter's cousin understood it. You say he did. You do not mention that the man chose another cup of ale before Dawn's labour, because this is not so much news as the expected behaviour of mankind. The monk nods once, good, then come. You're beginning to learn that in a medieval infirmary, rest is a beautiful idea discussed mainly by people who are not responsible for anyone's fever. He leads you through the yard, where the rain has stopped and frost is beginning to take hold again along the edges of barrels, stones, and sleeping carts. The broken wheel from the western road has not yet arrived, but two spare rims lean against a shed wall, black hoops against pale plaster. They look like frozen moons waiting for a cart to remember them. Beyond the infirmary stands the herb garden. By daylight, it may be orderly. Tonight, under cloud-thinned moonlight and the trembling glow of the half-burned candle inside the monk's lantern, it seems like a little kingdom of stiff stems, dark beds, wattle fences, and labels no one but the brothers can read. Frost has silvered the sage leaves. Rue crouches close to the soil. Bethany rises in dry, stubborn spikes. Rosemary, protected near the wall, keeps a faint green even in cold. Straw has been laid over some beds, and clay pots sit upside down to shelter tender roots. like small helmets for plants that never enlisted. An old woman waits beside the gate. You recognize her from the leech chamber, the healer in the russet gown and teal kerchief. In the garden she seems even older and more rooted, as if she's been planted here along with the herbs and brought indoors only when someone needs bleeding, binding, scolding, or a cure that tastes like punishment. She carries a wicker basket, a little knife, and a wooden digging stick. The dog greets her politely. She greets him by name. This gives you pause. Dogs tell their names if you listen, she says, without looking at you. No one can quite agree whether this is wisdom, nonsense, or simply what happens when a person spends more years with animals than with polite company. The monk does not argue. He unlocks the herb gate with an iron key, and all three of you step among the beds. The cold here is sharper than in the lane. It comes up through your boots and settles in your knees. The healer bends to cut sage, choosing leaves that have not blackened at the edges. Sage is for the throat, she tells you, and for the belly, and for grief that sits too heavily after winter funerals. Some swear that if sage thrives in a household garden, the household itself will prosper, though others say sage grows best where women rule the home, and men have learned the useful art of silence. The monk pretends not to hear this. The dog, wisely, sides with the healer. She gives you the basket, and you hold it open while she drops in leaves soft with frost. Their scent rises strong and clean when bruised, almost enough to cut through the memory of alehouse smoke. Then she moves to rue, warning you not to touch too much with bare fingers. Rue is bitter, protective, and difficult, which makes it beloved by healers and disliked by nearly everyone else. It may be hung by doors against ill wishes. It may be steeped carefully for certain pains. It may be used in women's troubles, though the healer speaks of this in a low voice, not from shame exactly, but because the medieval world keeps many female things behind curtains, whispered over warm cloths and bowls of water. Even now, it is hard to tell whether a plant becomes powerful because it heals, because it frightens, or because enough people have believed in it beside enough sick beds. The healer cuts only what she needs. That, she says, is important. Plants dislike greed. You look at the monk to see whether this is doctrine. He is examining the latch on the wattle fence with great attention. Next comes Bethany, which everyone praises so widely that you wonder how any illness dares remain in Europe. Headache, bad dreams, stomach pains, heavy spirits, wounds, sleeplessness, and confusion of the mind all have at some point been handed to Bethany like unruly children to a stern aunt. The healer crumbles a dry leaf between her fingers and asks you to smell it. It is earthy, faintly bitter, not unpleasant, for the pilgrim's fever, she says, and for the woman who cannot sleep. Sleep, here, is not treated as a soft luxury. It is a gate the body must pass through to mend itself, and many things guard that gate poorly. Cold straw, fleas, aching teeth, crying infants, bad dreams, church bells, snoring strangers, and the fear that the cough beside you may become your own by morning. The healer cuts lavender too, and meadow sweet from a tied bundle stored under the eaves. A sachet beneath a pillow may sweeten dreams. A charm under the bed may keep away night terrors. Some swear that counting prayers works better than counting sheep, though sheep at least rarely require correct Latin. At the far end of the garden, beneath a straw covering, she digs for roots. The soil is hard, and the monk takes the digging stick from her after a moment, working it down with both hands. He loosens dark earth around a clump of valerian. Its root smells strong enough to wake the dead and offend them afterward. The healer smiles at your expression. Valerian may calm the troubled, draw sleep closer, and ease certain pains. It may also remind everyone in the room that healing does not always arrive smelling like roses. She gathers comfrey root for bruises and broken places, though she warns that every useful thing has its temper. She takes fennel seed for wind in the belly, because medieval dignity often ends at digestion. She adds a little yarrow for bleeding, mint for nausea, and a strip of dried bark from the storehouse for aches that settle in old joints when rain comes. Each object goes into the basket with care, named softly, as if the plant should know the errand it has been given. You stand there under the winter sky, holding the growing weight of leaves, roots, and human need. Beyond the garden wall, the town sleeps uneasily. Beyond that, muddy roads cross frozen fields toward manor, shrine, market, and keep. Within these wattle fences, medicine seems smaller than fear but more faithful. It is not grand. It does not promise victory. It smells of frost, dirt, bitter leaves, and hands that have worked too long. When the basket is full, the healer covers it with linen. The monk locks the gate. The dog trots ahead, his tail lifted as if he alone has supervised the harvest properly. You carry the herbs back toward the yellow seam of light under the guest-house door, and the half-burned candle trembles in the lantern, lower now, but still alive. You carry the basket of sage, rue, betony, valerian, and winter-stiff roots back through the yard while frost brightens the edges of the stones, and the sky begins, very reluctantly, to pale. The guest-house door opens on warmth, vinegar, and the sleepy labour of people who have not so much passed the night as negotiated with it. The suspicious monk takes the basket from your hands as carefully as if it were a reliquary, though the smell rising from the valerian root suggests a saint of rather difficult manners. He sorts the herbs at once, setting some near the hearth to dry further, steeping others in hot water, and tucking the most bitter things into small cloth bundles that look innocent enough until one remembers their purpose. For a little while you sit again on the bench by the wall. The dog folds himself at your feet. The half-burned candle, now little more than a bent pillar with a stubborn flame, gutters beside the cross. A novice brings you a heel of coarse bread and a bowl of pottage thin enough to see the spoon through, though it is warm, and this counts for much before sunrise. Outside, the monastery bells mark the hour, and with them comes the sound of the town stirring awake, a cart axle whining, shutters opening, a rooster insisting upon his own importance, and the first market voices rising beyond the walls like crows discovering a field. The infirmary glances toward the window slit and then toward you. "The market will be up," he says. "We need clean linen, fresh thread, and if Master Hugh is where he always is, tell him the carter with the western wheel may need his hands before noon." "Master Hugh, you ask?" The monk gives you that faintly tired look that means the answer should already exist in the world. The barber surgeon. Of course. There are few phrases in medieval life that inspire confidence less effectively than barber surgeon, which sounds as though two acceptable jobs have been stitched together in a hurry and then handed a knife. Still, the monk wraps a few coins in cloth, gives them to you, and sends you out with a dog and a novice who peels away at the first corner toward the baker's yard. The town has changed by morning, where it was all shadow, smoke, and muttering last night. It now opens itself in damp grey light. Women sweep rushes from thresholds. Boys carry water yokes that creak across their shoulders. A fishwife slaps her tablecloth against a stallboard with such force that nearby pigeons depart in offended clouds. The gutters still run brown, but above them the houses show more colour indigo sleeves at a window, a saffron kerchief tied beneath the chin. russet wool hung to dry under an eave. The smell of the place rises in layers: fresh bread, horse dung, wet wood, onion skins, fish brine, smoke, and the pleasant sharpness of morning cold. You reach the market square just as the toll is being collected at the edge of the open space. A clerk under a striped awning takes his due with ink-stained patience, while merchants grumble as tradition requires. Some carry baskets of leeks and cabbages, some unload smoked eels, cheese rounds, or bolts of rough cloth. A tinker lays out pots, a cooper argues over hoops, a woman selling beeswax candles guards them as if every passer-by is an arsonist. Over everything hangs the sound of setting up. Cartwheels knocking over ruts, stall poles thumping, geese objecting to commerce on moral grounds. Near the fountain, where the square broadens, you find Master Hugh. He has claimed a patch of open ground beside a post where coloured cloths hang to dry, red and white squares moving in the breeze like flags from some tiny, deeply unhygienic kingdom. He's a stout man in a dark wool coat with his sleeves rolled, exposing thick forearms freckled with soap scars and old nicks. His beard is clipped close. His cap sits low over shrewd eyes. Beside him rests a wooden chest, a stool worn smooth by generations of anxious backsides, a brass basin painted red within, a jug of water, folded linens, razors wrapped in oiled cloth, and a leather roll of instruments that glint only a little, which is somehow worse. He is shaving a Reeves servant when you arrive. The servant sits rigidly on the stool with a cloth tucked under his chin, trying to preserve dignity while half the square walks past pretending not to stare. Master Hugh lathers him with soap, scrapes the razor down one cheek, wipes the blade on linen, and continues speaking all the while to 3 different listeners at once. This, you quickly see, is part of his trade. He removes stubble, trims hair, lances boils, binds cuts, lets blood, cups shoulders, and gathers news with equal efficiency. If the market square has a beating heart, it may be the man with the razor and the red basin. You wait until the shave is done. The servant rises smoother of face and poorer of purse. Master Hugh tosses the used water aside, wipes his hands, and squints at you. "Monastery," he says. You hand him the cloth-wrapped message and the coins for linen and thread. He reads quickly, grunts at the mention of the carter, and nods toward the side of his chest. "Tell your monk I'll come if the wheel mender doesn't prove enough. Fever too." "Fever, weariness, and a great dislike of leeches, you say?" Then he's like every Christian man. This seems to satisfy him. You remain because the square is lively, and because a barber surgeon at work exerts the sort of dreadful curiosity that once noticed cannot be abandoned. A woman arrives with a boy whose forearm bears a long shallow cut from splitting kindling too close to dawn. Master Hugh seats the child on the stool, washes the wound with watered wine, and inspects it with brisk fingers. The boy stares with heroic misery at the basin. His mother keeps saying, "He is brave," which is less a description than an instruction. Master Hugh threads a needle. He does not need many stitches, only 2, perhaps 3, and he mutters something about fools, wood piles, and boys who believe axes respect enthusiasm. The boy survives the matter with more tears than blood, and when it is done, Hugh binds the arm in clean linen and tells the mother to keep it dry, warm, and untouched by grandmothers bearing goose grease. She sniffs as though personally related to such grandmothers. No one can quite agree whether goose grease draws out corruption or merely gives every cut the smell of dinner. Some swear by honey for wounds, some swear by cobwebs, some insist that a salve works best if mixed while the moon is waxing and the patient avoids eels. Those who tell the tale never fully agree, but they all prefer their certainty delivered by someone sitting behind a chest of sharp objects. Soon a different customer takes the stool, an old fuller with a heavy head, red face, and temples throbbing visibly with complaint. Headaches, he says. Heat in the blood. Blurred sight. His wife, standing behind him, adds that he snores, curses in his sleep, and eats salted fish as if preparing for a siege. Master Hugh nods as though all this confirms the obvious. He sets out the red basin, ties a band above the fuller's elbow, and chooses a small blade. You try very hard to appear like a person who has seen this 100 times, and is not quietly reconsidering the entire medical profession. Bloodletting, after all, is no side curiosity here. It belongs to the great weather of the body, the balancing of humours, the old belief that too much blood may weigh a man down with heat, heaviness, or dangerous fullness. Some barber surgeons consult calendars marked with favourable days, and some will not bleed a patient when the moon is in certain signs, lest the body take offence at celestial mismanagement. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the stars are being asked to guide the hand or simply to take the blame. Master Hugh opens the vein quickly and with the casual neatness of a man slicing cheese. The fuller winces. The basin receives its due. Nearby, 2 women discussing the price of onions never lower their voices. A merchant interrupts to ask whether Hugh has heard of a Lord Steward coughing blood near the North Road. A pilgrim buys thread from the next stall and offers an opinion on bad air. Before the cloth is tied off, half the square knows the fuller's habits, the steward's cough, the likely cost of oats by next week, and the rumour that the broken western cart carries dyed wool worth more than the mule pulling it. That is the thing about the wooden stool. It is not only a seat for shaving and surgery, it is a throne for local truth, a confessional without absolution, a place where pain loosens tongues more effectively than ale. You stand there in the cold market light, with cloths fluttering overhead, and the toll clerk still scratching notes at the edge of the square, and you understand why the monk sent you. In this world, healing is never far from trade, gossip, or weather. A man may come for a trim and leave with a dressing on his arm, news of his cousin's fever, and advice about avoiding lampreys in Lent. Master Hugh hands you the clean linen and the thread wrapped neatly in paper. "Mind the dog," he says as you turn to go. He looks like the sort that steals sausages. The dog gazes at him with grave innocence. You head back through the waking square, past cabbages, candles, fish scales, and damp wool cloaks. Behind you, the barber surgeon sharpens his razor on leather with a long whispering stroke, and the sound follows you all the way toward the monastery gate, thin and steady as morning itself. You return from the market with clean linen under one arm, thread tucked safely inside your cloak, and the dog trotting beside you with the offended dignity of an animal accused of sausage theft without evidence. Behind you, the barber surgeon's razor still seems to whisper along its leather strap, a thin morning sound woven into the bells, cartwheels, and market cries. The town has fully woken now. Smoke lifts from chimneys in blue-grey threads. Women shake rushes from doorways. A boy drives geese through the lane with a stick and the desperate expression of someone losing a battle against poultry. At the monastery gate, the suspicious monk takes the linen and thread from you, checks both as if you might have traded them for sugared almonds and lies, then nods toward the road beyond the east wall. "The shrine," he says. Before the crowd thickens, you have just come from one crowd and would not mind never seeing another, but the monk is already turning away. A novice places a small covered flask into your hand, wrapped in cloth against the cold. It holds water that has touched the reliquary in the sick house. Or so he tells you in a whisper. Whether the water touched the relic, the reliquary, or merely the confidence of the brother carrying it, is not made entirely clear. Such distinctions, in this world, are often left for God, lawyers, and people with too much leisure. You pass out through the east gate with a handful of pilgrims moving the same way. The road here leaves the town in a brown ribbon of mud and frozen ruts, bordered by winter fields where frost still lies in the furrows. Farther off, bare trees comb the pale sky. A crow balances on a signpost and complains at everyone equally. The dog sniffs the ditch, finds nothing worthy of theology, and continues. The roadside shrine stands where two paths meet, one toward the abbey fields, another toward a low stone bridge over the river. It is not large. A little timber shelter protects a painted figure of a saint whose face has been softened by years of rain. Candle smoke and hopeful fingers. Beneath the shelter hangs a row of crutches, strips of cloth, wax shapes, and little offerings tied with thread. A carved wooden hand dangles beside a wax ear. A small wax leg leans against the wall, carefully moulded but slightly melted at the knee. There are coins too, dark with handling, and bunches of dried flowers gone brown in the cold. No one can quite agree whether the saint favours fevers, lameness, toothache, or desperate cases generally, but everyone agrees he has helped someone's cousin, neighbour, aunt, or a shepherd from 3 valleys over. That is enough to bring people walking through mud. Certainty travels poorly in winter, but rumour has excellent boots. A few pilgrims kneel already in the straw before the shrine. One wears a scallop shell on his hat, another a round badge stamped with a saint's head, another carries a staff polished smooth by miles and weather. Their cloaks are patched, their faces wind-reddened, and their shoes tell stories no mouth could improve. You stand aside while an old woman unwraps a candle from linen and sets it before the painted figure. The candle is beeswax, not cheap tallow. It gives off a honeyed scent as it catches flame, and for a moment the bitter world softens. A mother brings forward a child with a cough. She touches the child's chest, then touches the saint's wooden foot, then ties a narrow strip of blue cloth to a peg. Some swear illness can be left behind in cloth, especially if the cloth has touched the sufferer's skin and is knotted with the right prayer. Others warn that such habits come too close to old charms, the kind grandmothers remember while priests pretend not to. Those who tell the tale never fully agree, but the cloths remain, fluttering under the shrine roof like little pieces of human worry. You hold the covered flask, unsure whether to offer it, guard it, or apologize to it. The novice who came with you, a round-faced lad with chapped hands, explains softly that some drops may be given to the feverish pilgrim from the guest house, if the infirmary judges it fitting. The water is not medicine in the way sage is medicine, nor in the way linen binds a cut, nor in the way the barber's blade lets blood. It is a plea made drinkable. You turn that thought over while the morning wind slips beneath your cloak. Near the shrine, a man with a stiff leg kneels with difficulty. His wife supports his elbow, and he gives her a look of irritation that is really gratitude wearing bad clothes. They place a wax leg on the ledge, not because wax can bargain like coin, but because a body part shaped in wax says clearly what the mouth may stumble over. Here is the pain, here is the hope, here is the part of me I wish heaven would notice. The shrine keeper, a thin layman with a brown hood and a nose red from the cold, collects spent candle stubs into a wooden bowl. Waste no wax. You remember the monk saying, and here too every scrap matters. Wax may be remelted, cloth may be retied, offerings may be recorded, moved, guarded, or quietly repaired. Even miracle has housekeeping. The shrine keeper trims a wick with a small knife, nods at a pilgrim's coin, and tells a story about a mason whose swollen hand eased after 3 nights of prayer. He tells it gently, not as proof exactly, but as one more coal placed near the fire of belief. You rest on a low stone near the shelter. The dog sits beside you and watches a pilgrim eat bread from a satchel, with the intense spiritual focus of a scholar before scripture. After a moment, the pilgrim breaks off a crust and gives it to him. This may be the first miracle you personally witness. A bell sounds from the town, then another from the monastery, their notes crossing over the frozen fields. The pilgrims bow their heads. The mother with the coughing child closes her eyes. The man with the stiff leg grips his wife's hand. You find yourself stilling too. Not because you know what to believe, but because everyone around you is holding hope so carefully that it feels rude to move too quickly. Even now, it's hard to tell whether such shrines heal bodies, steady hearts, or simply give suffering a place to kneel. Perhaps the border matters less to those who arrive in pain. In the sick house, you have seen vinegar cloths, leeches, bitter herbs, and warm ale. In the market, you have seen razors, basins, stitched cuts, and old jokes told to frighten fear away. Here, beneath painted wood and candle smoke, you see another kind of treatment, the naming of need before heaven. The placing of wax and cloth where silence would otherwise sit. When the flask is safely wrapped again, you rise with the novice. The shrine keeper gives you a tiny scrap of blessed thread to carry back, for the woman with the swollen cheek, he says, though no one has told him of her. Perhaps someone did. Perhaps news travels faster than carts. Perhaps saints are better informed than market clerks. You do not ask. You walk back toward the town with cold in your sleeves, candle scent in your hair, and the dog's muddy paws marking the road beside yours. Behind you, the shrine remains at the crossing, small under the pale sky, bright with low flames and doubtful miracles, while ahead the monastery waits with its sick beds, its half-burned candle, and its stubborn work of keeping hope warm until evening. You return from the roadside shrine with candle scent still caught in your cloak, and the tiny scrap of blessed thread tucked safely inside your sleeve. The town wall rises ahead, damp and grey beneath a sky that has begun to gather itself for rain again. Behind you, at the crossing, the little shrine fades into mist, its small flames hidden by distance, but you keep seeing the wax leg, the blue strip of cloth, the mother's hand resting on her coughing child's chest. Hope, you are learning, has many shapes in this world. Some are brewed in cups, some tied in linen, some sharpened on a barber's strap, and some left under a saint's painted foot where the wind can worry at them. The dog trots beside you, chewing the last memory of the pilgrim's crust. He looks deeply satisfied with religion. At the gate, traffic has thickened. A cart loaded with sacks of grain waits behind 2 women arguing with the toll-keeper about whether a basket of eggs counts as market goods if several eggs are already broken, and therefore, in their view, more like a tragedy than merchandise. A boy leads a mule with one shoe loose. A friar in a travel-stained cloak presses through with his hood low. Then the rain comes, not in a dramatic burst, but in a steady, determined fall. The kind that seems less like weather and more like a policy. The monk's errand finds you before you reach the guest house. A lay brother meets you under the arch and tells you the infirmary has been called to the manor court near the old hall, where villagers have gathered over a quarrel about a failed cure. You are to bring the blessed thread, the flask, and, if possible, your patience. This last item is not wrapped in cloth, and you doubt its supply. You cross the town toward the manor hall, passing beneath dripping eaves, through puddles that hide stones with malicious skill. The hall stands on a raised patch of ground near the market square, built of heavy timber with a stone undercroft and a roof dark with wet thatch. Men and women crowd beneath the outer shelter, their cloaks beaded with rain, their shoes muddy, their voices low but sharp. Chickens wander where they should not, which is apparently everywhere. A Reeves clerk sits at a trestle table under the porch, guarding his ink from the rain with one hand and his dignity with the other. Inside, the manor court smells of wet wool, rushes, smoke, old ale, and damp wood. A fire burns near the centre, doing its best and failing with grace. Along the walls, benches hold tenants, servants, widows, craftsmen, and one prosperous miller who looks as if he expects the Lord to admire his hat. The floor rushes are fresh enough to show the Lord's household has prepared for formal business, though already they are darkening beneath muddy feet. At the high end sits the steward, not the Lord himself, for lords are often represented by men who have mastered the art of looking disappointed before anyone speaks. The infirmary stands near the hearth with his hands tucked into his sleeves. Master Hugh, the barber surgeon, is there too, rain shining on his cap. The old healer in the russet gown sits on a low stool, very straight-backed, with her wicker basket at her feet. She looks neither frightened nor pleased, only tired in the way of someone who has seen people demand certainty from a world that mostly provides turnips and weather. The quarrel concerns a man named Osric, who lies ill in a cottage near the river. His brother says the healer gave him a bitter drink and a charm tied under his bed, and he worsened. The healer says he had been worsening for 3 days before anyone thought to send for her. His wife says the cottage stank of river fog and spoiled pottage, and she had warned him not to eat from the cracked pot. A neighbour says she saw a black cat under the sill. Another neighbour says there is no need to bring cats into everything. The room murmurs approval at this rare moment of reason. No one can quite agree whether Osric's sickness comes from bad air off the river, angered humours, sin, witchcraft, bad food, cold feet, or the fact that he slept in damp clothes after hauling reeds. Each explanation has supporters. Each supporter speaks as though the matter is obvious, and everyone else has arrived late to wisdom. The steward lifts a hand, one at a time. Naturally, 3 people begin at once. You stand near the door with rainwater cooling at your collar and watch the court do what courts do, turn fear into words, words into blame, and blame into something that can be fined, forgiven, or written down. The clerk scratches at his parchment. His ink threatens to clot in the cold. Beside him, a small pile of tokens and coins waits for fees. Justice, like medicine, has expenses. The infirmary is asked whether charms are lawful. He answers carefully, because careful answers keep necks comfortable. A prayer written in good faith, he says, may comfort the sick. A charm promising power apart from God is dangerous. A scrap of blessed thread from a shrine may be used if the heart remains humble. A hare's foot, he does not say, though the healer's pouch hangs visibly at her neck, and the dog stares at it with scholarly interest. Some swear that illness follows envy, entering through a glance too sharp or a compliment given with a crooked heart. Others believe night air carries corruption, especially when mist rises from marsh or river. Bad smells are treated with suspicion. Sweet herbs are burned. Windows are closed when perhaps they should be opened when perhaps they should be closed, and everyone agrees afterward that the other choice would have saved trouble. Master Hugh speaks next. He has seen Osric's belly swollen, his skin hot, his tongue dry. He suggests foul food and excess cold, perhaps fever in the gut. The old healer nods once, then says Osric also refused her instructions, drank strong ale after the bitter infusion, and ate salted fish because his cousin told him salt strengthens a man. The cousin, present in the back, finds sudden fascination in his shoes. A small ripple of laughter moves through the hall, soft and brief. The steward does not smile, but his eyebrow performs a modest journey. The wife produces the cracked pot as evidence, wrapped in cloth, and smelling powerfully even from where you stand. Several people lean away. The dog retreats beneath a bench, proving once again that he may be the wisest creature in town. The steward orders the pot removed. The clerk writes this down with the solemnity of a monk recording a comet. After more argument, the matter settles not into truth but into arrangement. The healer is not fined. Osric's brother must pay her for the herbs already used, though less than she asked, because courts enjoy cutting coins in half without touching a knife. The cracked pot is to be destroyed. The cottage is to be aired when the rain stops, the bedding changed if dry straw can be found, and the infirmary will send a vinegar cloth, betony, and a prayer copied properly. The blessed thread you carry is accepted too, not as proof, not as cure, but as comfort. In this world, comfort is not a small thing. When the court breaks, people spill back into the rain, still arguing in gentler tones. The healer passes you and touches the basket at her feet. "Spoiled pottage," she mutters. "Always blame the woman with herbs before the pot that smells like death's pantry." It is the sharpest joke of the day, and perhaps the truest. You step out beneath the porch. Rain drums on thatch, runs from cloaks, darkens the timber posts. Across the square, market stalls huddle under canvas. The monastery bell sounds again, blurred by weather. You think of Osric in his riverside cottage, of bad air and bad luck, of charms under beds and pottage in cracked pots, of all the ways sickness becomes a story people tell so fear has somewhere to sit. Then you follow the infirmary back through the wet lanes, carrying less certainty than when you arrived, but perhaps a little more mercy. You follow the infirmary back through the rain-bright lanes while the manor court empties behind you, its arguments thinning into the steady hiss of weather. The town seems smaller beneath rain, all its timbered fronts pulled close, all its doorways dark and watchful. Water runs from thatch in silver ropes. The market stalls sag under wet canvas. Somewhere a wheelwright curses at a swollen axle. Somewhere a woman laughs too loudly, the sound quick and tired, as if she has thrown it ahead of herself to keep the cold away. By the time you reach the monastery gate, dusk has begun to gather again. The day has folded strangely, as winter days do, giving little light and asking much in return. The dog shakes himself beneath the arch, spraying droplets across the stones with the solemn generosity of a priest blessing a crowd. The porter mutters at him. The dog looks innocent. This has become a pattern. Inside the guest house, the half-burned candle is nearly gone. Only a small golden stump near the cross, but its flame still clings on. The suspicious monk takes the damp cloak from your shoulders and hangs it near the hearth. He does not ask whether you are tired. In his world, tiredness is not a condition but the ordinary surface of life, like mud on boots or smoke in rafters. A bowl of pottage is pressed into your hands. You eat beside the fire, tasting barley, onion, and ash. While the room settles into evening a pilgrim dozing, a novice grinding herbs, the woman with the swollen cheek holding warm linen against her jaw, the feverish carter sleeping in fits beneath a wool blanket. You begin to think the night may pass quietly. This, of course, is how nights trick people. Before the second bell after dark, a knock comes at the guest house door, rapid and low. The porter opens it to a man soaked through, his cap in his hand, his face white above a beard shining with rain. He speaks first to the monk, then to the old healer, who's been sitting near the hearth with her basket on her knees. You catch only pieces river cottage, pains begun, first child, midwife called, more linen needed, hurry if you can. The monk looks toward the old healer, she's already standing. You're given a bundle of clean linen, 2 beeswax candles, a packet of dried raspberry leaf, a little salt, and a small flask of warmed ale wrapped in cloth. No one asks if you wish to go. The man needs another pair of hands, and yours are present. That is enough. The dog rises too, but the monk points sharply toward the hearth. No. The dog sits, deeply wounded by injustice. You step into the rain with the healer and the anxious husband. The lane to the river cottage runs downhill beyond the east wall, past a row of gardens, a winter storehouse, and a little roadside shrine where the saint's face is hidden in shadow. Mud sucks at your boots. The husband walks too quickly, then too slowly, then stops to look back, as if fear has tangled his legs. The healer tells him to breathe. He does. Badly. No one can quite agree whether childbirth belongs more to women, saints, fate, or the stubborn courage of the child itself. Men speak of it loudly afterward and poorly beforehand. Women speak of it in kitchens, at wells, beside beds, in half-finished sentences passed from mother to daughter like folded linen. Some swear that an iron key under the bed helps unlock the womb. Others tie red thread near the wrist, or place a knife beneath the mattress to cut pain. Though priests frown at knives being asked to perform theology. The cottage stands near the river, low-roofed and wattle-walled, its thatch dripping steadily. A lantern burns by the door. Inside, the air is thick with heat, smoke, wet wool, and the sour, sweet smell of human fear. Rushes cover the floor. A pot of water steams over the hearth. 2 women are already there, the midwife, broad-shouldered and grey-haired, and a neighbour with sleeves rolled high, her arms shining from hot water. On the bed, beneath wool blankets, the young wife grips a twist of linen and stares at the rafters as if she might climb out through them, if only she could find the proper rung. The midwife looks at the healer, then at you, then at the linen bundle. Good, she says. Put it there. Warm your hands first. It is a simple command, but it tells you something important. Cold hands are an insult here, and perhaps a danger. You crouch by the hearth, holding your fingers toward the flame until they ache. The husband tries to enter fully, sees his wife's face, hears a sound from her throat, and turns the colour of old cheese. The neighbour steers him toward the door with practised kindness. Fetch more wood, she says. There is wood. Then fetch it again. He obeys, grateful for a task that cannot look back at him. The midwife works by lantern glow, calm as a bell rope. She has clean linen folded near the bed, a bowl of warm water, a cup of ale with honey, a small pouch of salt, and beads hanging from her wrist. Around her neck rests a charm sewn into cloth, though whether it holds a prayer, a saint's name, or words older than the church, no one explains. Even now, it is hard to tell whether such things are used because people believe fully, because they fear not using them, or because birth is too large a doorway to leave undecorated. The young wife cries out. The midwife leans close, murmuring not soft lies but steady truths. Breathe now, hold now, sip this, rest while you can. The healer makes a warm drink from the herbs and ale, bitter but gentle, and lifts it to the woman's mouth between pains. The neighbour wipes her brow. You pass folded linen when asked, then another cloth, then a candle. Your part is small, but small parts matter in rooms where everyone is holding one edge of the same fear. Some swear that knots in the room must be loosened during birth, so no cord, belt, or clasp may bind what should open. The neighbour remembers suddenly and unties the woman's girdle, then loosens a hanging pouch from the bedpost. The midwife nods without looking up. The healer moves an iron key beneath the bed, perhaps for luck, perhaps for custom, perhaps because the husband's mother will ask later, and no one wishes to have that conversation. Outside, rain taps the shutters. The river mutters in the dark. The husband drops firewood outside the door with a clatter and apologizes to everyone, including the wood. Inside, the cottage tightens around the bed, warm and dim, full of candlelight and breath. There is pain here, yes, but not spectacle. It is work, ancient and frightening, ordinary and immense. The woman labours, the midwife watches, the old healer waits, and the world narrows to linen, water, whispered prayer. And the next breath, at last, near the deep hour before dawn, the room changes. A small cry rises, thin and startled, no louder than a bird waking under leaves, and every adult in the cottage goes still. The midwife moves quickly with linen and warm hands. The neighbour begins to weep quietly while pretending not to. The husband, outside, asks if all is well in a voice so fragile it could be folded into the candle flame. "Come in," the midwife says at last. He enters as though stepping into a chapel. His wife lies exhausted, pale and alive, one hand resting against the bundled child at her side. No one makes grand speeches. No one declares victory over death, though everyone in the room has felt its shadow near the rafters. The healer crosses herself. The midwife ties off her work, checks the mother, checks the child, and asks for more warm water as calmly as if ordering bread. You stand near the hearth with smoke in your eyes and damp drying from your sleeves. Birth, here, is not treated as rare. It happens in cottages, halls, barns, and back rooms. It happens while bread must still be baked and cows still milked. Yet no one in this room mistakes ordinary for easy. The medieval world welcomes new life with linen, warmed ale, charms, salt, prayer, and hands steady enough to keep working when fear grows teeth. When dawn begins to pale behind the shutters, you leave the cottage with the old healer. The husband remains inside, whispering to his wife as if afraid to wake the miracle. Rain has stopped. The road shines faintly, far off. The monastery bell calls the morning hour, and you walk toward it slowly, carrying the smell of smoke, birth, river mist, and beeswax back into the waking world. You return to the monastery as morning lifts itself thinly over the river fields, grey and quiet, with the smell of smoke still folded into your cloak and the memory of the newborn's first cry resting somewhere behind your ribs. The old healer walks beside you without speaking. She has the look of someone who has carried too many dawns home in her bones. At the gate, the dog is waiting, seated beneath the arch with great dignity, as if he has spent the night guarding civilization from mice, shadows, and poor judgment. When he sees you, he rises, forgives you for leaving him behind, and falls into step as though nothing has happened. Inside the guest house, the half-burned candle has finally died. A new one stands in its place, taller, straighter, and far less beloved. The suspicious monk notices you looking at it and says, "Wax ends, work does not." This is not quite comfort, but in his mouth it is nearly poetry. You eat coarse bread dipped in warm ale near the hearth, while the healer washes her hands with vinegar and hot water. The carter with the broken wheel sleeps heavily. The woman with the swollen cheek has tied the blessed thread near her pillow. The feverish pilgrim mutters in dreams beneath his grey blanket. For a little while, the room seems to hover in that soft pause after long labour, when no one trusts peace but everyone borrows it anyway. Then hooves sound in the yard. A castle groom arrives under the monastery arch, his cloak dark with damp, his horse steaming in the cold. He asks for the infirmary and speaks of the keep on the ridge, of the Lord's chamber, of a learned physician newly arrived, of urine flasks and books, and a patient whose household has grown anxious enough to send for every kind of help at once. The monk's face changes very little, but his eyes narrow. He gathers a small satchel linen, dried betony, a vial of rose vinegar, a spoon, a roll of notes, and a little packet of something so expensive he wraps it twice. "You come," he says to you. Of course you do. By now you are less a traveller than a loose thread caught in the town's sleeve. The road to the keep climbs beyond the market and up through fields stiff with frost. The dog follows until the town gate, where the porter blocks him firmly with one boot. The dog sits down in protest. You look back once and see him watching you with the wounded patience of a saint denied pilgrimage. The keep rises from the ridge in pale morning, all cold stone and narrow windows, and banners hanging damp from the walls. Its gatehouse smells of iron, horse sweat, wet straw, and yesterday's smoke. Men-at-arms warm their hands over a brazier while pretending not to be cold, which is one of the oldest military traditions. Inside the outer yard, servants cross quickly with buckets, baskets, firewood, folded cloths, and covered dishes. A scullion carries trenchers stacked under one arm. A laundress beats linen against a stone trough, her sleeves rolled despite the weather. Even in a castle, comfort is something other people work very hard to create for someone else. You enter through an oak door bound with iron and climb a stair that curls inside the wall. The stone steps are worn hollow in the middle by generations of feet. At the top, the chamber passage glows with torchlight and smells of beeswax, rushes, fir, and spiced wine. Fresh rushes have been laid over the floor, mixed with herbs to sweeten the air. A tapestry hangs crookedly along one wall, showing a hunt where every animal looks more resigned than frightened. The Lord's chamber is warmer than any room you have entered since this journey began. A fire burns in a wide hearth. Fur-lined cloaks lie over carved chests. A silver cup rests beside a bowl of stewed pears. The bed is hung with heavy curtains of faded green, and within them lies the patient, not the Lord himself, but his elder sister, Lady Isabel, a woman with sharp cheekbones, silver-threaded hair, and the unmistakable expression of someone too well-bred to admit that suffering has become inconvenient. Beside the bed stands the physician. He wears a long dark gown trimmed with fur and a cap that makes his head look scholarly before he speaks, which is useful in any profession. A leather belt holds small instruments, a writing tablet, and a pouch that smells faintly of cloves, musk, and money. On a table near the window stand several glass urine flasks, each catching the weak daylight in shades of straw, amber, and cloudy gold. Nearby lie costly books with red and blue initials, their pages weighted open by a polished stone. A servant hovers with a basin. Another holds a candle, though the room is already bright enough, because wealthy illness prefers ceremony. No one can quite agree whether a learned physician sees more deeply into the body than a village healer, or whether he simply names uncertainty in Latin and charges accordingly. Still, when he lifts one of the flasks and turns it against the light, Everyone in the chamber watches as if he has raised a crystal ball. He studies the colour, the thickness, the sediment at the bottom. He tilts the glass. He frowns thoughtfully. He asks what Lady Isabel has eaten, when she last slept, whether she dreams of water, fire, black animals, or falling towers. He takes her wrist and feels her pulse with 2 fingers, looking not at her hand but slightly beyond it, as if the rhythm might be written somewhere in the air. Then he examines her face, the dryness of the lips, the brightness of the eyes, the pallor beneath the skin, the faint yellow at the corners. The infirmera stands quietly at the foot of the bed. The old world of vinegar cloths and bitter herbs has entered the rich room, and for a moment both kinds of medicine regard one another across the rush-strewn floor. The physician speaks of humours, but with grander furniture around the words, too much collar, perhaps, heat gathered inward, the stomach offended by rich meats, spiced sauces, late suppers, sweet wine, and the burden of noble anxieties. Lady Isabel closes her eyes as if even her diagnosis has overstepped. Some swear that a person's urine reveals the whole inward kingdom: liver, heart, digestion, heat, cold, even the hidden temper of the blood. Others say the stars must be consulted before a remedy is chosen, for Mars may sharpen fevers, Saturn may chill the bones, and the moon may tug fluids through the body like a laundress pulling cloth through a tub. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the heavens truly guide the cure, or whether people feel calmer when the sky is partly responsible. A servant brings the physician an almanac. He checks the day, the hour, and the sign governing the body part in question. The infirmera's mouth tightens almost invisibly, perhaps at the delay, perhaps at the expense, perhaps because Lady Isabel looks more in need of rest, plain broth, and fewer relatives whispering than of Saturn's opinion. But he says nothing. In a lord's chamber, silence is often the safest herb. The physician orders a light broth, no heavy meat, warmed wine with a little cinnamon, and a draught compounded of costly spices and cooling herbs. He does not advise bleeding today, because the sign is unfavourable, and because her strength is low. This news seems to disappoint one elderly aunt near the hearth, who has apparently come hoping for a procedure. Noble households, you discover, can turn even illness into a spectator event. The infirmera offers rose vinegar for the cloth and batoni for sleep. The physician considers this, then agrees with the air of a king granting land he does not own. The cloth is steeped, wrung out, and laid near Lady Isabel's brow. Her hand relaxes by a finger's breadth. It is not a miracle. It is barely a change. Yet the room softens. You stand near the wall, smelling beeswax, expensive wool, spiced wine, and human fear dressed in better fabric. Rich patients suffer under curtains instead of rough blankets. They drink from silver instead of wood. Their urine is held to the light in glass, not guessed over in a clay bowl, but their skin still burns, their sleep still flees, their families still whisper, and their healers still move carefully through the fog between knowledge and hope. When you leave the chamber, the physician remains with his books, the infirmera with his satchel, the servants with their basins and candles. Down the worn stair you go, back toward the yard, the cold air, and the road below. At the gate, you glance toward the town, where the dog is surely waiting, where the sick house candle has been replaced, and where medicine continues in rooms both poor and grand, never certain, never still, always reaching. You leave the keep beneath a low ceiling of cloud, stepping from the guarded yard into air that feels thinner, colder, and less impressed by noble curtains. Behind you, Lady Isabel remains in her warm chamber with her urine flasks, spiced wine, rose vinegar, and relatives whispering as if illness might be startled into leaving by good manners. Before you, the road slopes back toward the town, pale with frost in its higher ruts and dark with mud where cartwheels have worried it open. The infirmary walks beside you, his satchel tucked beneath his cloak, his face set against the wind. He has said almost nothing since the physician consulted the stars, which tells you several things at once. At the town gate, the dog is waiting exactly where you left him, seated in a patch of straw near the porter's stool. He rises with grave forgiveness, sniffs the monk's hem, then sniffs yours, apparently judging whether castles have improved either of you. They have not. The gate tunnel smells of damp stone and torch smoke. Inside the walls, the day has grown crowded and grey. Smoke drops low from chimneys, pressed downward by the weather, so that the lanes seem filled with a blue-brown haze. It crawls beneath eaves, gathers under hanging signs, and clings to wool cloaks, hair, and open mouths. The gutters run with refuse, onion peel, dirty water, fish scales, and the mysterious brown froth that no one wishes to name too precisely. A woman tosses a basin into the street and calls a warning only after the splash, which is generous by local standards. You pull your cloak closer and taste soot on your tongue. No one can quite agree whether sickness comes more readily from foul smells, spoiled food, cold damp, divine displeasure, unlucky stars, or the breath of the already ill. Yet nearly everyone agrees that bad air is suspicious. It is called corrupt air, night air, marsh air, fever air, plague air, and other names spoken more softly near doorways. Some swear that if you can smell rot, your body has already begun arguing with it. Others say danger hides in air with no smell at all, which is an especially unfair arrangement. The infirmary stops near a narrow crossing where river mist slides between the houses. A group of townsfolk has gathered around a brazier set in the street. Into it they throw rosemary, juniper, and dried lavender. The smoke rises sweeter than the lane itself, though only by comparison. A woman holds her child close and turns his face toward the scented smoke. An old man waves his cap through it, then presses the cap to his chest as if capturing protection in the wool. The dog sneezes and looks personally betrayed by herbal medicine. Some swear that sweet smoke drives away corruption before it settles in the lungs. Others carry little pomanders filled with cloves, musk, or rosemary, breathing through them when passing a sick room or a ditch. The rich may hold oranges stuck with spice. The poor make do with herbs tied in cloth, vinegar on a rag, or a handful of crushed leaves tucked near the nose. Even now, it is hard to tell whether these habits shield the body, soothe the mind, or simply give fear something practical to hold. You pass a doorway marked with a chalk cross. Inside, someone coughs with a hard, hollow sound. A neighbour has placed a bowl of vinegar near the threshold and a sprig of rue above the lintel. No one enters. No one walks too close either, though everyone looks. Rumour moves faster than any cart in town. By midday, a cough becomes fever. By evening, fever becomes pestilence. By nightfall, someone's cousin has seen black swellings in a village that may or may not exist beyond the North Road. Those who tell the tale never fully agree, but they all lower their voices before finishing. The monk sends a novice to carry broth to the chalk-marked house and tells him to leave it on the stool outside. Mercy, here, sometimes stops at the threshold, not because it is absent, but because fear has built a little wall around it. You watch the boy go with the bowl wrapped in cloth, his lips moving in a prayer he may have learned yesterday and needed today. The lanes grow narrower as you near the river quarter. Houses lean over the way, their upper beams almost meeting, trapping smoke and damp beneath them. Rushes swept from floors lie in heaps by doors, waiting to be carted away or simply forgotten until rain persuades them to join the street permanently. A tanner's yard sends up a sour reek strong enough to bend thought. Beside it, a woman sells onions and claims they purify the blood if eaten raw before sunrise. Her own eyes water constantly, which may be proof of something, though not necessarily her claim. At the bridge, mist rises from the river in pale folds. The water carries scraps of straw, a broken reed basket, and the reflection of a chapel bell tower trembling in the current. A man with a cloth tied over his mouth sprinkles vinegar along his sleeves. A pair of boys hang bundles of herbs from a cart pole. An old widow mutters that illness slips in through unwashed hair, while a barber's apprentice argues that shaving the neck lets bad vapours escape. Master Hugh, if present, would surely find a way to charge both opinions a fee. You stop near the riverside cottage where Osric lies ill. The cracked pot from the manor court has been set outside, broken properly now into shards. New straw waits in a bundle by the door. The shutter is propped open despite the cold, and vinegar cloths hang from a line, dripping into the mud. The wife, pale with worry and lack of sleep, receives Bethany from the infirmary and listens as he tells her to keep the bedding dry, the fire steady, the air moving when the stink grows heavy, and the pottage fresh enough that even a hungry man must not fear it. This advice sounds simple. In this world, simple advice is often the hardest to obey. Dry straw costs labour, clean cloth costs washing, good food costs coin, fresh air costs warmth. Every cure asks payment in some form, and poor households have already spent much of themselves before sickness enters. As you walk back through the lanes, the town seems to breathe around you in troubled, smoky breaths. Doors open and close, bells mark the hour, a woman shakes herbs into a brazier, a child wears a little red thread around his wrist. A man spits 3 times when someone says the word plague, then looks embarrassed and does it once more for safety. You do not laugh. The morning has taught you that superstition is often fear wearing work clothes. By the time you reach the monastery gate, smoke has settled in your cloak, river mist in your hair, and the taste of vinegar somewhere behind your teeth. The dog presses against your leg, warm and solid. Inside, the sick house waits with its candles, bowls, blankets, and stubborn hands. Outside, the town keeps burning herbs against invisible corruption, sweeping rushes, boiling pottage, whispering rumours, and trying, breath by breath, to make the air safe enough to live in. You've barely crossed back beneath the monastery arch when the porter calls after the infirmary, and the day, which had seemed full enough already, opens another door. A runner from the keep stands in the yard, bent with breath, his cloak spattered to the waist with mud. He is not the groom who came before, but a younger servant with hair plastered to his forehead and fear making his words stumble. A guard has been hurt below the keep, he says. Not Lady Isabel, not the physician's chamber, not the warm room with green curtains and urine flasks catching noble light, but the lower stores where barrels, weapons, salted meat, and winter shadows are kept. The infirmary's face closes around the news. He reaches for his satchel before the runner finishes speaking. You are given no grand invitation. The monk only looks at you, then at the linen still drying near the hearth, and you understand that hands are needed again. Master Hugh has been sent for too, but the road up to the ridge is slick, and a barber surgeon's stool cannot move faster than the man carrying his tools. The dog rises hopefully. This time no one stops him, perhaps because the porter is busy, perhaps because the dog has finally worn down the moral order of the town. He slips beside you with the quiet satisfaction of a pilgrim whose shrine has approved him. The climb to the keep feels colder than before. Smoke hangs low over the fields, and the frost has retreated into muddy water that fills every rut. The runner hurries ahead, then waits, then hurries again. Unable to make his fear match the pace of other people's legs, the infirmerer does not run. He saves his breath, as all who have worked long beside sickness learn to do. Panic spends itself quickly. Linen, vinegar, honey, wine, and steady hands must last longer. At the gatehouse, the guards let you through without the usual questions. Their faces are tight, and one crosses himself as you pass. Inside, the yard smells of horses, damp straw, iron, smoke, and the sour tang of men who've been standing too long in wool and worry. A cook's boy carries a basket of coarse bread toward the hall. A maid with a wooden bucket pauses to stare. Even castle business slows when Payne enters by the lower door. You descend by a stair cut into the thickness of the keep wall. The steps are narrow, damp, and worn at the edges, lit by a torch that smokes as if personally offended by the air below. The dog hesitates at the top, sniffs, then follows, though with less confidence than usual. Down here, the keep seems older. The cheerful noise of the yard fades, replaced by the hollow drip of water, the creak of timbers, and the heavy silence of stored things. Barrels line one wall. Sacks of grain sit on raised boards against rats and damp. Iron-bound chests rest beneath hooks holding coils of rope, spare harness, cracked shields, and tools whose purposes are best not considered before sleep. The guard lies on a pallet of folded cloaks near the storeroom hearth. Though the fire is small and reluctant, he is young with a dark beard and a face gone pale beneath sweat and soot. A beam slipped while they were moving casks. Someone tells the monk, or a rack gave way, or a careless man failed to wedge the support. Those who tell the tale never fully agree, though each version includes great certainty and someone else's fault. His arm has been bound roughly with a strip torn from a cloak, and his breathing comes hard whenever he shifts. The infirmerer kneels beside him and speaks his name. Ewan. The guard opens his eyes. Brother, stay with my voice. This seems too small a remedy for such a place, and yet it works. The young man fixes on the monk's face while others crowd too close. The infirmerer sends them back with one lifted hand. The chamber reluctantly obeys. Medieval people may argue with theology, weather, and taxes, but a calm man with a satchel near a wounded body commands a certain respect. You set down the linen. A servant brings warmed wine in a clay cup, not for drinking first, but for washing. The monk unwraps the rough binding carefully. You look toward the barrels, toward the torch, toward anything that allows you not to stare too closely. The injury is bad enough to quiet the room, but not described by anyone in loud detail. The monk cleans with wine, slow and firm, while the guard grips a leather strap and breathes through his teeth. Wine is precious, yet here it is poured over pain, because some swear it cleanses foulness and strengthens flesh against corruption. Others say boiled water would do, if anyone remembered to boil enough of it before disaster arrived. No one can quite agree whether pain itself means healing has begun, whether it proves the body still fights, or whether people say this because the alternative is too cruel to speak. The monk says only, "Breathe." That is wiser than most philosophies. He lays honey on clean linen. Honey's kept in a small stoppered jar, thick and golden, smelling faintly of summer fields utterly absent from this underground room. You remember beeswax candles, the shrine flame, the candle that burned down in the guest house. Bees, it seems, serve the medieval world long after flowers have vanished under frost. Honey draws praise from healers, monks, midwives, and grandmothers alike. Some swear it keeps wounds sweet and resists corruption. Some call it a gift from God's smallest labourers. The dog watches the jar with renewed religious interest. The monk places the honeyed linen and binds it with careful turns. He asks for splints, and 2 narrow pieces of smooth wood are found from a broken crate. A guard mutters that iron should be laid nearby to keep harmful spirits from entering an open hurt. Another says Saint Sebastian is better for wounds. A third insists Saint Roch helped his uncle, though someone points out that this is mostly said for plague. The infirmera, busy with the binding, says, "Put the iron by the door and pray to whomever makes you useful." This is the closest he comes to a joke, and it settles the debate. A small iron knife is placed on a shelf near the threshold, not touching the guard, simply present. Perhaps it is superstition. Perhaps it is comfort. Perhaps iron, like saints and vinegar, has become one more thing people use when the body reminds them how little is under command. Even now, it's hard to tell whether the knife guards the room or merely gives fear a place to stand quietly. Master Hugh arrives at last, breathing hard from the climb, his red basin under one arm and his leather roll tucked beneath the other. He examines the binding, nods once, and makes only a few adjustments. This restraint surprises you until you see the respect between him and the monk. Not warm, not friendly, but practical as a well-made hinge. Hugh sharpens nothing. He only checks, tightens, warns, and tells the guard that if he tries to prove bravery by standing before he is told, he will personally shave one eyebrow while the man sleeps. The guard gives a weak laugh, which seems to ease the room more than any prayer yet. The steward sends for better blankets. A kitchen maid brings broth. Someone adds wood to the little hearth, and the flame brightens against the barrels and stone. Slowly the storeroom changes from a place of accident into a place of tending. The guard is lifted more comfortably. The binding holds. The honey jar is stoppered. The wine cup is set aside. The iron knife remains by the door, stern and unnecessary, or perhaps necessary in ways no one can prove. When you climb back toward the yard, your hands smell of linen, wine, smoke, and honey. Above, the sky is dimming again, the afternoon already leaning toward evening. The dog emerges beside you and shakes dust from his coat. Behind you, under the keep. A young guard breathes beneath wool blankets while men speak more softly around him. You carry that quiet with you down the ridge, feeling how medieval medicine is often less a victory than a vigil. Clean what can be cleaned, bind what can be bound, sweeten what might turn foul, pray over the rest, and do not let fear be the only thing in the room. You come down from the keep with honey still sweet on your fingers and smoke caught in the seams of your cloak, while the afternoon folds itself into a dim, pewter-coloured hush. The town below looks softer from the ridge, almost harmless, its walls tucked into mist, its roofs breathing smoke into the low sky. But as you descend, the details return: the mud, the gutters, the leaning houses, the sour places where old rushes wait to be carted away, the winter wind nosing beneath your hood like a curious thief, The dog walks beside you, proud of having been admitted to castle business and convinced you suspect that the whole matter was improved by his presence. The infirmera says little. Master Hugh has remained behind a while longer with the guard, and you carry the monk's smaller satchel, now lighter than before but smelling strongly of rose vinegar, honey, and damp linen. Near the town gate, a woman sells hot peas from a pot and calls out that they strengthen the blood. A man beside her claims roasted onions draw sickness from the chest if eaten with mustard. Their rivalry seems peaceful, though both glare at a third vendor selling spiced wafers as if sweetness itself were morally suspect. The infirmera pauses under the gate arch. Apothecary, he says. The word feels like a door opening onto a shelf full of bitter things. You follow him through a lane you've not yet taken, narrower than the market way, where shop signs hang low enough to threaten taller hats. A cooper's sign swings beside a painted mortar and pestle. There, beneath a projecting upper floor, stands the apothecary's shop, small, dark, and crowded even from the threshold. The door is oak, iron-latched, and polished around the handle by years of anxious hands. When it opens, a smell rolls out so thick that you nearly step back. Dried herbs, vinegar, wax, dust, spices, old wood, bitter roots, rose water, camphor, and something animal that refuses to identify itself politely. Inside, every wall is shelves. Jars crowd upon jars, some clay, some glass, some wood, each marked with careful letters. Bundles of dried plants hang from rafters in brown, green, and faded gold. Small drawers line the back wall, their knobs dark from use. A balance scale stands on the counter with brass weights no larger than peas. Beside it lie folded papers, a horn spoon, a knife, a mortar-stained green, and a little locked chest that seems to contain either jewels or medicines priced as if they were jewels. Light enters through a tiny window and lands weakly on dust motes, making the room look like the inside of a scholar's sneeze. The apothecary himself emerges from behind a curtain carrying a tray of jars. He is narrow, tidy, and wrapped in a dark blue gown with sleeves pinned back. His beard is trimmed to a point, and his fingers are stained yellow-brown from substances you decide not to ask about. He greets the infirmera with a nod, greets you with a glance, and greets the dog with the expression of a man calculating breakable inventory. No tails near the lower shelf, he says. The dog sits at once, which is frankly suspicious. No one can quite agree whether apothecaries are healers, merchants, scholars, spice dealers, or wizards who learn to write invoices. They sell remedies, but also scents, pigments, oils, syrups, powders, and strange comforts from far ports. Some swear the best medicines come from across the sea, because distance improves authority. Others say a root from one's own hedgerow knows the local body better. Those who tell the tale never fully agree, especially when the imported remedy costs 3 days' wages and tastes like a punishment invented by monks. The infirmera gives his list more rose vinegar, dried figs for a syrup, licorice root, poppy seed in modest measure, clean wax, and a powder the physician at the keep has requested for Lady Isabel's draught. At this, the apothecary's eyebrow rises with the delicacy of a drawbridge. He unlocks the little chest and removes a packet wrapped in waxed cloth. Cinnamon, clove, and a little galangal, he says, also white sugar, if the lady expects her suffering to be civilized. The infirmera's mouth tightens. How much? The apothecary names a price. The monk closes his eyes briefly, perhaps in prayer, perhaps to keep from saying something unsuitable among expensive spices. You watch as the powder is weighed grain by grain. The brass scale trembles under the smallest additions. Each spice seems to carry a whole road inside its ships. Ports, merchants, tolls, mules, warehouses, arguments, thefts, storms, and finally this cramped shop where a noble woman's stomach may be persuaded to behave by a pinch of something that has crossed half the known world. Medieval medicine, you realize, does not always come from nearby gardens. Sometimes it arrives with salt stains, customs fees, and stories no one can verify. The apothecary lets you smell a jar of cloves. Their scent is dark, warm, almost sweet. He shows you dried lavender, fennel seed, anise, powdered alum, myrrh, frankincense, ground bark, and a syrup thick as winter dusk. Then, with great seriousness, he lifts a small box containing a dried toad. You try not to look impressed. You fail. Some swear dried toad, properly prepared, draws poison, fever, or swelling. Others say it belongs more to fear than medicine. Even now, it is hard to tell whether such things persist because they help, because someone once believed they helped, or because people in pain are willing to give even a toad a fair hearing. The apothecary replaces the box with the calm of a man who has seen many faces make your face. Another drawer holds powdered mummy, he says, though whether it is truly ancient flesh from foreign tombs, a fraud made nearer home, or merely dust sold with confidence, no one in the shop appears eager to settle. The infirmary refuses it before the price is named. Honey, wine, rest, and clean linen have fewer stories attached, he says. The apothecary smiles thinly, and smaller profits. There is humour in it, but not cruelty. Everyone here understands the bargain. Poor people stretch sage, onions, ale, and prayer. Rich people buy ambergris, sugar, pearls ground into powder, and physicians to explain the stars. Yet bitter draughts do not respect rank as much as rank would prefer. A noble mouth twists at the same taste that makes a carter curse. The body is democratic in its complaints, if little else is. A woman enters while the purchases are wrapped. She asks for something to quiet her husband's cough and help him sleep without making him too heavy at dawn, when the cows must still be milked. The apothecary sells her licorice, horehound, and a small measure of syrup. He tells her to keep the hearth smoke from the bed if she can. She laughs at this, not because it is funny, but because her cottage has one room and smoke is practically a relative. You carry the wrapped parcels out beneath your cloak. The air outside feels plain after the shop, almost empty. The dog sneezes once, as if clearing imported medicine from his soul. Evening gathers along the roofs. The bells begin to sound from the monastery, calling the town toward prayer, supper, and whatever troubles wait after dark. You walk back with the infirmary through the damp lane, past closed stalls and dim windows, carrying costly spice for a lady, bitter root for a cough, wax for candles, and the faint unease of shelves filled with hope, trade, guesswork, and powerful smells. Behind you, the apothecary's door shuts with a wooden click, locking away its jars, powders, dried beasts, and little scales until the next frightened hand reaches for the latch. You reach the monastery as evening closes over the town, carrying the apothecary's parcels beneath your cloak, while the last bell of supper trembles through damp air. The guest-house windows glow weakly ahead, small squares of amber set into stone. The dog trots first through the gate, proud of his return, nose lifted as if he personally has guided cinnamon, licorice, wax, and uncertainty safely home. Inside, warmth receives you in layers, hearth smoke, wet wool, barley pottage, beeswax, vinegar, boiled herbs, and the sour-sweet breath of tired bodies sharing one roof. The infirmera unwraps the parcels on the table with care. Rose vinegar is placed near the basin. Licorice root goes into a small dish. The costly spices for Lady Isabel are set aside as if they might attract thieves or angels. The new wax is given to the novice, who looks at it with reverence. Wax ends. Work does not. You remember, and tonight the work has gathered like weather. The sick room is fuller than before. The feverish pilgrim sleeps badly beneath his grey blanket, lips moving around prayers he cannot quite wake enough to finish. The carter from the broken western road turns on his pallet and mutters about wheels, mud, and a mule with poor morals. The woman with the swollen cheek sits propped against the wall, the blessed thread tied near her pillow, her eyes closed while a warm herb cloth rests along her jaw. Osric's wife has come from the riverside cottage and waits by the hearth for more Bettany, looking as if worry has hollowed her cheeks. The young guard from the keep is not here, but a message says he still breathes under wool blankets, which in this world is news worth receiving slowly. You're given a stool near the long chamber's middle, where a candle has been fixed in a shallow iron holder. It is not the old half-burned candle. That one has already surrendered itself to smoke and memory. Yet this new candle burns with the same wavering patience. Its light touching bowls, blankets, wooden cups, and the reliquary near the little altar. The reliquary's dull glass stones catch the flame and pretend, not very convincingly, to be jewels. No one can quite agree whether the bone inside belongs to the saint named on the label, a different saint entirely, or some unfortunate stranger whose afterlife has become complicated. Still, several people bow when passing it. Doubt, you notice, rarely stops a person from hoping. Night watch begins without announcement. There is no dramatic line between day's labour and night's keeping. The room simply darkens, the doors are barred, the rushes are stirred near the hearth, and everyone still awake lowers their voice. A lay sister moves from pallet to pallet with a wooden cup of watered ale. The infirmera checks brows with the backs of his fingers. A novice grinds dried herbs in the mortar, turning Bettany and fennel into bitter green dust. Someone mends a torn linen strip by candlelight with thread from the market, each stitch small and practical as a prayer with sleeves rolled up. You help where you are told. You hold a cup while the pilgrim drinks. You pass a folded cloth. You carry a basin away and return with clean water warmed near the hearth. None of these tasks feels grand, yet each one joins the room's slow rhythm. A cough rises, fades. A spoon clicks against clay. Straw whispers beneath a turning body. Outside. Rain begins again, tapping on the shutters and running down the stones like fingers searching for a way in. Some swear that the deep hours after midnight are the most dangerous for the sick, when the body's heat sinks low and wandering spirits press close to bedsides. Others say it is only that the living are most tired then, and fear grows bold when lamps burn small. Those who tell the tale never fully agree, but the infirmera keeps the fire fed after midnight and lays a sprig of rosemary near the door, which seems to please both schools of thought. The dog sleeps beneath your stool, except when someone unwraps bread. Then his faith revives instantly. A novice gives him a crust, pretending it fell. The dog accepts this miracle without dispute. Near the altar, Osric's wife speaks quietly with the old healer. You hear cracked pot, dry straw, fever in the belly, and the healer's low answer. She gives the woman a bundle of herbs and tells her to boil them gently, not angrily, because some remedies resent rough handling. This may be a joke, a belief, or a way of making an exhausted wife slow her hands. Even now, it is hard to tell whether wisdom works because it is true or because it makes people breathe differently. The bells mark another hour. Their sound comes muffled through rain and stone, less a ringing than a memory of ringing. You find yourself measuring time by small acts, the turning of a blanket, the trimming of a wick, the warming of a cloth, the scratch of the infirmerer's pen as he records who drank, who slept, whose fever rose, whose bleeding slowed, whose prayer was promised to which saint. Ink scratches, rain falls, breath gathers, breath releases. The world narrows to candlelight. For a while, you sit beside the feverish pilgrim while the others tend to a man coughing near the hearth. The pilgrim opens his eyes and asks whether he has reached the shrine. You tell him he has reached the monastery. He seems to consider whether this is close enough, then asks if the saint heard him. You do not know. You say the candle was lit. It is not an answer, but it is something solid enough for him to hold. His fingers loosen on the blanket, and he sleeps again. That is the painful mercy of the night watch. No one here can promise morning. The vinegar may cool, the herbs may ease, the charm may comfort, the relic may strengthen the frightened heart. The cup may be lifted, the fire fed, the linen changed, the prayer whispered, and still the body may choose its own road. Yet the helpers do not stop because certainty is absent. They move more gently because it is absent. Toward the last dark hour, the sick room quiets. Even the rain softens. The candle burns lower, making the rafters seem higher and the beds farther apart. The monk sits at the table with his head bowed, not asleep, not fully awake, his ink-stained thumb resting beside the open book. The old healer dozes with her basket at her feet. The lay sister folds clean linen into a neat pile for dawn. You lean against the cold stone wall, wool blanket around your shoulders, dog warm against your boot, and listen to the breathing of strangers. The bells will ring soon. The town will stir. The market will argue itself back to life. But for this little pocket of darkness, the world is held together by waxlight, tired hands, bitter herbs, and the soft decision to stay beside one another until morning comes. The bell comes before the light. It rolls through the sick room in a low, patient wave, passing over wool blankets, folded linen, clay cups, sleeping faces, and the dog's twitching ears beneath your stool. For a moment, no one moves. The night has made everyone heavy, as if each body has been stitched to the dark with very small thread. Then the lay sister rises, smooths her apron, and lifts the kettle back toward the hearth. The infirmerer opens his eyes beside the book, and the old healer straightens with a little crack of bone that sounds like a twig under frost. Morning begins not as brightness, but as a thinning of blackness along the shutters. You stand slowly. Your back protests the stone wall. Your hands smell of vinegar, smoke, and watered ale. Around you, the sick room has changed in tiny ways that feel important. The feverish pilgrim sleeps more quietly now, one hand resting near his badge. The woman with the swollen cheek opens her eyes and manages a nod when the warm cloth is changed. The carter from the western road mutters less angrily about his wheel, which may be the first sign of healing or simply exhaustion triumphing over complaint. No one can quite agree whether sleep is a cure, a mercy, or the body's way of closing the shutters while repairs are attempted inside. The monk checks each person in turn. He is gentler in the morning, though he would surely deny it under oath. He feels brows, looks at tongues, asks after thirst, pain, dreams, bowels, and whether anyone has been foolish enough to eat what was not given. Medieval care, you have learned, is deeply concerned with the stomach. a person may speak of stars, saints, and humours, but sooner or later someone asks about pottage. A novice carries out the old rushes near the door and brings in fresh ones mixed with a little lavender. The scent rises faintly beneath the heavier smells, like a small hymn trying not to be embarrassed. Another novice scrapes ash from the hearth. Bread is cut. Thin ale is poured. A wooden bowl of barley pottage is passed from hand to hand. Outside, the town wakes. A cart creaks. A rooster declares victory over darkness. And a woman scolds someone for leaving a bucket where any Christian foot might find it. The infirmary gives you a small bundle to carry beyond the abbey wall, a cup for the shrine keeper, a strip of clean linen for Osric's wife, and a message for Master Hugh about the guard under the keep. You accept them because by now the road has claimed you as part of its furniture. The dog rises immediately, stretches and trots to the door before anyone can object. Even the monk lets him pass. Some victories are won by persistence, some by holiness, and some by simply being a dog who refuses to leave. You step out into the yard. The air is pale and cold. Frost edges the barrels and the cartwheels. Smoke lifts straight from the kitchen chimney for once, as if the sky has become less hostile during the night. The herb garden lies quiet behind its wattle fence, every bed silvered. You see the place where sage was cut, where we crouched bitterly under frost, where valerian roots were dug from hard soil. No one can quite agree whether plants gathered before sunrise hold stronger virtue. But the old healer has already sent a novice to check the beds, and no one argues with a woman who knows which roots smell worst and work best. At the gate, the porter lifts the bar. The oak door opens onto the road beyond the abbey wall, and the morning spreads before you slowly muddy lane, river mist, bare fields, distant keep, town roofs wet with dawn. You pause there, not because the view is grand, but because after so many rooms of heat, fear, smoke, and whispered remedies, the open air feels almost impossible. The dog steps ahead, then looks back, impatient with reflection. You follow. Down the road, the shrine at the crossing glows faintly with 2 early candles. The shrine keeper is already awake, trimming wicks and collecting stubs into his wooden bowl. He takes the cup you bring and asks after the pilgrim. You say he sleeps. The keeper nods as if sleep has been accepted as a partial answer. A new strip of cloth has appeared under the shelter, tied beside the blue one from yesterday. A wax hand leans near a wax foot. Hope has multiplied in the night. You walk farther, past the riverside path where Osric's cottage lets out a thread of smoke. His wife comes to the door, hair covered, face tired, eyes clearer than before. She takes the linen and tells you his fever broke a little toward dawn, though she says it cautiously, afraid good news may hear itself and flee. Some swear one should never boast of improvement before the 3rd day, lest sickness grow jealous and return. You do not know if sickness has ears, but you lower your voice anyway. Beyond the river, the keep stands in the pale light. A messenger meets you near the bridge with word that you and the guard has slept, that Master Hugh will change the binding later, and that Lady Isabel has taken broth without insulting it, which in a noble household is treated as a favourable sign. The physician remains with his books. The monk's rose vinegar remains near her bed. The world continues to combine learning, habit, pride, tenderness, and expensive spices in proportions no one can measure. You turn back toward the abbey wall as the sun presses weakly through cloud. The town is alive now. Market stalls open. Fishwives call out. The barber surgeon's red basin catches a brief flash of light. The alehouse door yawns open. releasing yesterday's smoke and the smell of spilled drink. Somewhere beneath the painted tooth sign, a man is surely explaining that pain was not so bad, now that it is over and everyone else remembers differently. You smile only a little. The painful reality of medieval medicine has not become less painful by morning. Leeches still wait in jars, razors still shine, teeth still ache, fevers still rise from crowded rooms and damp bedding, bad air, spoiled food, cold, hunger, wounds, childbirth, and fear still walk the roads beside every traveller. But you have seen something else moving with them women warming linen by lantern light, monks saving candle stubs, healers cutting sage in frost, pilgrims tying cloth beneath a saint's painted foot, a barber threatening to shave an eyebrow to keep a guard from standing too soon, a wife changing straw though her hands shake, and strangers lifting cups to lips too weak to hold them. Medicine here is not certainty. It is presence. It is the refusal to leave the suffering entirely alone in the dark. You pass beneath the abbey gate once more, and the dog comes beside you, warm and mud-footed and pleased with the arrangement of the universe. The sick-room door opens, beeswax, pottage, vinegar, and herb steam drift out. The bell rings again, gentler now, and the sound settles over the yard like a wool blanket laid across tired shoulders. And now, as the morning grows softer, you let the road fall quiet behind you. The keep fades into mist. The market voices lower until they are only a murmur beyond the wall. The shrine candles burn small and steady at the crossing, and the river carries the pale sky without hurry. Inside the guest house, the fresh rushes lie sweet beneath tired feet. The hearth gives a low red glow, and someone folds clean linen for later, because later always comes, and hands will be needed again. You sit near the warmth, with your cloak loosened and your boots drying slowly by the stones. The dog curls at your feet, nose tucked beneath his tail. The monk writes one final line in his book, then closes it softly. The old healer rests her basket beside the wall. The room breathes in a long shared rhythm, all its fear thinned by dawn, all its candles quiet, all its shadows drawn back into corners where they can do no harm for now. You do not need to solve this world tonight. You only need to leave it gently. Let the vinegar sharpness fade. Let the herbs become only green scent in warm air. Let the bells drift farther away, over roofs, over fields, over muddy roads shining faintly under morning cloud. The cold stone remains, but the blanket is warm. The straw is dry enough. The fire is low and kind. Somewhere, a cup is set down carefully. Somewhere, a prayer ends. Somewhere beyond the abbey wall. The medieval day begins again without asking you to follow. So you rest. You breathe slowly. You let the candlelight grow dim behind your eyes, and the old town softens into darkness, safe at last inside the hush of sleep.